Dushyant and Priyanka know whom they're talking to, and then you can turn it off, just give a wave, and always nicer to see some faces. As Selma.
Hi. Hi.
Brilliant. And there are all of them in that corner, for me in the left corner.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. We are live streaming from Design Investigations Film Studio, as you can see. Hello, everyone, and welcome. We are very delighted to welcome our guest lectures, Studio Raw Material from Rajasthan in Western India. Dushyant and Priyanka, welcome, and thanks for taking the time to join us. I will just do a little introduction. So Studio Raw Material is a rural design practice based in the desert plains of Western India, working together with the local community. Founded by Dushyant Bansal and Priyanka Sharma, graduates from the Royal College of Art, the practice is deeply connected with the place through material culture, people, and vernacular practices. Studio Raw Materials works are designed through an investigative lens by examining the socio-economic forces that reimagine waste materials and redefine notions of value. The resulting work ranges from limited edition furniture pieces, sculptural objects, material investigations, and spaces. Selected works have been exhibited at Joints and Boards at the Aram Gallery and the Graduates at Carpenter's Workshop Gallery as the best of European talent selected by Ludwig Edelkoot and featured in the book Why Materials Matter by Sital Solanki, published by Presto. Most recently, they were selected as the Emerging Design Studio of the Year by Design Awards in 2021. We are so happy to have you here, especially as this semester our students are working on the topic of salvage and creating objects for leisure from salvaged materials. We're really understanding how materials are extracted from our planet and how much of them are wasted, and how can we reimagine what these material and infrastructural flows look like. So with that, thank you again, and I'll hand it over to you.
Amazing. Thank you for giving us this opportunity. And I think we'll just delve right into it. We thought we would like, just share the screen.
Can you see the screen?
Yeah.
Oh.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Do you want to?
So I just think a good way to start, like sort of talking about our practice is to, maybe start with a film that we had made, which basically shows a typical day in our workshop. And, I think it gives a layer insight into our approach to design, to making, and most importantly, a sense of place.
Can you all see it?
Yeah, it's just that you've got your Zoom window.
Okay.
You want to minimize that. I see.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Can you hear the sound?
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Oh.
Hi. I think we move to our presentation, and we can, I think,
Yeah.
have more questions later. Is that okay?
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah.
So, we collaborated with a young filmmaker based in Jaipur, the other place where we live, to create this film. And basically, the thing is that there's this strong contrast in the journey of any piece of stone before, before leaving the studio. So, like they end up in places which are very different from where we are. And when when friends or collaborators come to visit us, we take them around this area to show them the landscape, the quarries, the old structures and the craft. And we want to create, we want to like sort of capture something similar to that visit, because most people that we work with are based so far away from where we are.
I mean, we started our practice in the desert region of Western India, like Anna mentioned. It's this region called Makrana, and it's in the state of Rajasthan. It is a stark landscape with arid vegetation and the most common local trees known as khechri, with its characteristic sculptural form, thorny bushes and shriveled bark. Here one can see far into the distance for many kilometers and literally feel the dry, sandy air against the strong sunlight.
Our work is deeply connected with this region, which is rich in various minerals like salt, marble, clay, as well as plant-based resins. The image above was taken at the Sambar Salt Lake, about 70 kilometers from our studio. It is a striking thing to experience industrial production of salt and marble in such close proximity. The 230 square kilometers area of this lake is actually just a landmass. It is a very shallow, body which remains visibly dry for a large part of the year. The severely saline water is actually underground, and the water that you see above are actually the salt pans, which are these shallow enclosures they make, where the water evaporates and leaves behind salt crystals. The marble production, from Makrana is one of the oldest stone production sites in the world, in operation since the mid 17th century, and it's still conducted in a somewhat vernacular method. Unlike a lot of modern quarrying that we can see around the world, and also newer quarrying sites in India. And Makrana holds another important historical significance as the origin of the marble used in construction of Taj Mahal in Agra, which is about 400 kilometers east of the quarry, or these quarry sites. So these quarries are probably the most distinctive feature in this landscape. These quarries are a manifestation of nature. It makes apparent the layers of sedimentation which make the earth. A quarry is literally a piece of extraction, and therefore also a symbol of the human impact on landscape. So in this way, it is a microcosm of geological processes as well as the industrial intervention.
One important aspect of our practice is to observe and learn from what we see around us. As you can see in the image, there are a lot of discarded marble blocks used as furniture and building material in the everyday life here, like this tea shop. So this idea of reuse is very present in the local thought. A fundamental principle of the approach is to make do with very little and work within the economy of means. These are rural communities where sustainability is evident and livable as daily practice.
Our approach to design is also based on how we would like to live, observing and being attentive to the regional materials and influences, everyday objects, traditional and changing practices of the people, being mindful that vernacular practices are not static and are constantly evolving as well due to the socio-economic changes that occur with time. Our work, aims to explore connection to a place by calling attention to the local materials and geography and combining it with native skill, grounded in the context where all these different aspects exist together.
Industrial scale production and especially extraction also leaves behind industrial scale waste in its consequence. We are interested in investigating materiality in relation to social and economic forces that guide its preconceived notions of worth. The quarried marble block is dressed in a rectangular form to be cut into slices. These irregular blocks are usually the size of the room. The slices are typically used as slabs of flooring and wall cladding. During this process, a lot of offcuts are thrown aside with little or no value. These offcuts of marble form the starting point for our work. The size and shapes of the pieces we find dictate their final use.
We looked, yeah, I mean, yeah. So, I mean, like this is kind of showing our process of how we work. So in this image, you can see like, the pieces we find in this case, like, like two-dimensional slabs that we find, we sort of sort them and archive them. So each stone is individually selected and archived based on its markings, blemishes, and color. And also while making studies, each offcut from the archive is sort of like marked with coal or like
Chalk.
a chalk, and then the final shape is drawn on it and then cut all by hand, and sort of playing with these assemblages and like working out forms is a very important part of our design process. We are really inspired by the stark desert light, and this influence is hopefully evident across our work. The angular form of our pieces reference the play of shadow against the light. The abundant sunlight is a defining consideration for all our works, especially the architectural space we have built.
This is, I mean, we use a lot of the work we develop as like a practice of like going to the studio every day and playing in a way. Instead of looking at design as a very formal methodology, we work more instinctively in a studio through making and sampling ideas. In fact, drawings are the last stage of our process, more to document what has been made. Our practice is based here in the countryside and is greatly influenced by its indigenous design practices. Free from formal standards, it is often radically simple and unexpected as means to achieve the required function. Like for example, in this image, there's a small study on the right, which is the study we made, out of which eventually we came to this console. So we often just have a lot of parts and we kind of play around with them, assemble them, photograph them, and then
move them around and sort of see. I mean, these just give sort of an idea of like, like sort of just looking at different qualities of exploring the material qualities. So like, we like,
I mean, the texture, the thickness, the edges, and in marble, if you make it quite thin, it also emits light. And so it can be very hard, but as well as quite a soft material, depending on how you work with it. I mean, these are just some examples of some pieces and showing different textures.
Also like some studies which are not like, finished pieces. And more examples of like some of our finished pieces, how we.
I mean, these are kind of the first collection or first series of objects that we had done in 2016.
Yeah, and like an important aspect for us is also to work with the stones that are found very, in a very immediate surrounding of our studio. So we only work with these 6 or 7 kind of colors or marbles that we find, within a 200-kilometer radius. So, we like to be very limited and just try and push the certain stones that we find here. Like traditionally the production or, the making of work does not use a lot of technology. So we are used to, very like everyday methods of understanding and working with, easy processes. So I think like, we obviously sort of notice it now, but I think initially we subconsciously designed work that was meant to be handled by 2 or 3 people and not necessarily have to use machinery. So like the ergonomic, was like sort of became a part of the design as well.
And I mean, another important aspect you can see here is that we don't use a lot of adhesives, especially in our initial collections, the offcut series. And because we kind of, so all these pieces are based on the principles of joinery and the weight of the marble, which is generally a negative, actually helps stabilize the piece a lot of times.
Yeah, and quite interestingly, the workshop that you saw in the film was actually used to make like a lot of these large temples, which are commissioned by these religious trusts. So like they were really sort of carved and super decorated, but they sort of put together these large like building sized temples just with joinery. So that's the aspect we found really interesting when we.
From the Indian craft point of view, what we wanted to study and explore, how do they use different techniques and.
Yeah. So this joinery is also like something that we really work with. And here, like you can see the different editions of the same piece. And when making commission work that is edition, we sometimes have to, like we cannot always work with the ways that we find. So in this case, we try and keep it minimal and identify the most vital part of a piece that needs to be sourced. So like in this table, the top is very large and difficult to find such a large offcut, but the legs are carved out of discarded pieces. So like you try and make these compromises where like you still are working with the main ethos of the practice.
And it's also like, because earlier we've just made a few pieces and then we started making editions of them, and we do very small editions. But I think more our practice is moving towards more that we don't have to do this. Like we don't even need to use this one piece of marble as a top. Like we're trying to a lot of our work now. Also, we are using some more techniques which you'll see in the future.
Ahead in the presentation.
Yeah.
I mean, this is just again like looking at the landscape, and like to the left, this is the salt lake again, where when the salt starts to crystallize, they make these little mounds, for a while for them to sort of like fully dry out. And on the right, you see those salt pans, which is before the salt was made. And like when this water is kind of static, it produces these different like algae, and these different algae are what give different colors to these salt pans. And it's quite interesting to see like how these materials and these like colors in the same region sort of mimic each other. As you can see, the stone colors below the pans. Yeah. Hope. So this is the architecture project that we had done in the beginning while we were making our first collection. And the architecture project is sort of an extension of our studio practice, exploring also the connection to a place. This work transcends to a different scale while operating within the same regional parameters of the skill, the people, and the material. And it has a modest form and with a material palette of the regional hue, which is like the sandy colored stone. The building reads as an extension of the landscape, and it borrows its name from the Thar, which is the arid desert that surrounds this region. So we call it the Thar House. Yeah. The main construction material is the stone offcuts that are too small to be used for furniture. They are bound by stone dust mortar, which you can see, like we are making this mix in the image to the right. So these are bound by stone dust mortar, composed of marble powder, another byproduct of the industry, and other natural additives such as cactus sap and husk and lime, which are all like widely used in this region. The form and the spaces are based on simple cuboidal structures that exist throughout this region as dwellings or cowsheds or like grain storages and other functional shelters. And these are usually built by the users themselves using very scarce resources. The architecture of the space attempts to express the experience of being immersed in a singular material, like the stark terrain that it sits in. The rough marble walls of the house are contrasted with the polished stone floor surfaces and sculptural furniture, all made of the same stone, or like local stone. The initial challenge of the material restriction for us became the most defining aspect of this project. These are just like, some more sort of images showing the area around the actual structure of the house, and, like the quality of light.
And we use this space more to see our work in a different setting, but we also use this space sometimes as a studio, as it's only like around 20 kilometers from our workshop and our studio in Makrana. And it's also a really good place to go for when we work on collaborations with friends, or if someone wants to come work with us, then it's also a really nice space for people to be in and kind of.
Yeah, I mean, just some more images, and like, just the light and the landscape around. So the fragments that, like, got collected while making the flooring and everything for this house, they were on this site, and for the longest time, we were quite adamant that we don't want to move this and dump it somewhere else. So we collected these fragments and repurposed them to create pathways around the house. These paths puzzle together odd silhouettes of the discarded slabs, and, a natural patina of the materials which these materials acquired in its past life, such as chipped edges and, like little holes and discolorations, is presented as a form of embodied history of the material, which we quite like.
And I think this making these parts also like moved us into a whole new series of work that we'll share now, which is something we're working on right now.
Yeah.
In the studio.
So a little while ago, I mean, basically all stone, when you work with stone, being a natural material, they have these inherent fault lines, which often lead to breakage during the making process. And, and also, like, when you build in these vernacular methods using materials like lime, which is like slate lime. So the idea with slate lime is that when you mix it with water and you use it as mortar, over time it solidifies into stone again. So it's this very cyclical cycle, which is quite poetic as well. So referencing these construction techniques, we joined the fragments of one of our tables which broke while making, and we joined it using the red stone dust to highlight these fault lines. And like, we are basically being in this space, we are quite fascinated by the idea of fragments. And we had written at one point that fragments provide traces of their past and for us have helped create an understanding of the physical world. To us, each fragment is unique with its individual history and abstract notions of its origin, as well as possibilities of rectification.
I think we just wanted to give a little, a small reference of something that has inspired us in this, especially in this project, or this series of work that we're making. These are the linking pathways leading up to the Acropolis in Athens. Dimitri Piccionis was commissioned to lay out a scheme of paths, steps, drainage channels, and resting viewing points leading up to the base of the gateway of Acropolis in Athens and across the Philippapo Hill. He chose to construct using reclaimed architectural elements from demolished classical buildings, lintels, stoops, clay roof tiles. The reuse of these modest fragments lends historic authenticity to these parts, celebrating the essence
of the Acropolis.
And we kind of stumbled upon this. I mean, we weren't
aware of of the site or of the architect. But on our visit there, we were just like,
and it's like there's furniture and there's parts and there's it's a huge complex.
So we see our work as a way to reimagine waste materials, which includes collecting offcuts for use. So we have been thinking a lot about the ideas and acts of gathering. And we explored its many meanings through present and past cultural implications, wondering how it might have evolved into a noun, which is people coming together in a group, from the verb to bring together or collect or amass or forage. On the one hand, it is a simple act of getting together around a table to have a meal, a drink, to celebrate, to talk, to share. But looking back in time, it was probably more about collecting food or foraging for shelter, a way of life, a necessity.
This, okay.
So these are shelters that exist around the quarries, as you can imagine. It's in the desert, so it's really hot during the summer, and people spend about 8 to 9 hours around the quarries, sometimes in, and they use these little shelters to
marble blocks to kind of make these really beautiful sculptural shelters
and like resting places. So, as a studio based in India, a country with immense disparities in access to resources, we're always drawn to the incredible inventiveness in daily life, using unpretentious and simple indigenous structures made of local materials. Vernacular design here articulates local culture, local economy, and local environmental awareness. Since vernacular processes are primarily guided by limited resources, they offer a valuable model in its aim to accomplish a lot with very little. And you get to see this, a lot, so many examples just by being there. It's really incredible.
So in the last few years, so we're also documenting a lot of these structures around the studio because they are eventually disappearing.
Yeah, being replaced by corrugated metal sheets.
Yeah.
So this is a project that was commissioned by the Danish company and Tradition for the 3 days of design festival earlier this year. And this is a project called Studies Over Table, where they invited 5 design studios from 5 countries to push the boundaries of what is considered an archetypal table, as well as express something about their origin.
So as you can see, it's okay.
So the table that we proposed is made from collected stone slab fragments, which is sort of drawn from these parts that we made, and you get to see it a lot, and the pieces. So the final piece sort of composes each fragment as unique. The value of the final piece lies in the attention given to each fragment, which are collected from construction sites, and they were preserved in their original forms, the way we found them, while composing them as a whole. So the idea was to really keep its history within this piece. And this is the image of the piece from the back, which is sort of composed of more fragments, meant to support the form on top. So they are so the pieces at the bottom are sort of in a different direction, perpendicular to the pieces on top, which give it structural support on top.
Yeah, and we also signed it with the location it's made. I think it's always nice to kind of.
So these are the coordinates in Hindi.
Yeah.
And the name of the table, which is actually a village
near our studio. But it also loosely it's called khokar, which very loosely translates into this word called khokla, which means hollow. So even if it's a very big, heavy piece, but it's made with so many fragments that it's a certain hollowness to it.
Yeah. And this is the final piece.
I thought we'll just give an overview of the whole practice, but then talk about this one piece specifically, which we, perfect. Oops. Okay. So, so this is kind of like a little glimpse into our practice, and
it wasn't too long and boring.
Well, thank you very much.
I'm not able to hear. Nice.
Thank you. Sorry, I was muted. Absolutely
yeah.
beautiful work. Thank you. And let us decide whether it's boring or not.
Yeah.
It's really, really interesting.
Thank you.
I felt terribly homesick. I've spent many, many years traveling to Rajasthan. I made my NID diploma film in Jaisalmer. So this could I come and do a residency in your studio?
Of course.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Separate question.
Yeah.
Beautiful work. Thank you. We'll just open it up to questions or comments, or students feel free to jump in. Thoughts? Everyone's just wowed. Like,
I mean,
is this possible? Is it possible to have such a studio?
I don't know if it's a question, it's a thought maybe.
Yeah.
Since in Austria or in Europe, manual labor is so expensive.
Yeah.
Pieces like you do it, beautiful pieces would be, if you did it here, would be so expensive.
Yeah.
The material might be salvaged or cut-offs and maybe maybe free, but actually that wouldn't make a big difference in the production cost, because material is only like ever 5% of the production cost. How is that relation where you produce, or what effect does that have? Because it takes some craft and time to assemble these things, right? They're also so beautiful because they have time inscribed in them, right? So that's part of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
we could not make this work without the community that's around us that we work with. And so what we try to do is that we work with a very small team and we do very few pieces. So it's not like we're doing a big production. So we do quite a lot of experimental work, and I think how we see it going forward is because a lot of them, till now it was more about, I think we started our studio in 2016, but I was still studying in RC at that point. And so, we've been fully here since 2018, and a lot of our new work, I think we want to give more authorship to the people we work with as well. So I think what we want to do in the near future is to kind of set up a cooperative. So we won't exist as a company anymore. Like, we don't want to. So everyone has authorship, whether you are designing, whether you're making, whether you're someone who's selecting the pieces. So it's kind of becomes more, at least.
It becomes like more leveled, and especially the other aspect of your question for us is that, when we started out, and we worked in the design industry in India, and we were like, there are a lot of things that we were quite unhappy about. So when we decided to sort of set up our own practice, we were very mindful that we will not make what sells or what is looking at costing and stuff. And it's only possible because we are quite privileged looking at India as a country. So we made that decision that we will, we will stick it out with time, and we will take it quite slow, but really do what we want. And now we want to we try to extend that same privilege to our team, where they have a lot of time to make things. There is no rush, and making collectible design, we do get that kind of time to work on a piece, and people are okay to wait. So it's a lot about the culture we set in while setting up this practice, and now fortunately we can make it work.
Thank you.
Anybody else would like to have any questions? Toby? Can't hear you.
Yeah.
Okay. I wanted to know, since you're working with salvaged material and cut off pieces, how does the design process look? Is it more like sketching, or more like thinking with your hands and putting the pieces together?
I think right in the beginning we had maybe right in the beginning in 2016, we had done some rough sketches. And, like marble is also quite a specific material because you can only, in a way, like subtract from it. So, like while working with it, we realized that the best way to do this is to like really play with the forms then and there. So, like obviously there is this initial thought of, oh, maybe we go in this direction, but like the final drawing is often done once the piece is fully made to just document the piece. So it's so for, and like again, if you get a chance to come and visit, you should like you just see the sheer volume of material around. So so you don't like you don't need to make models, because like you will find each and every size of the piece that you want.
I mean,
Maybe not exact, but so you can play around with it. And it's a really like instinctive and fun process.
And I think it's also like, then it's not like us giving drawings and making, like, we work together quite a lot as a team, and we collect a lot of like interesting offcuts and based on like the marking sometimes or the colors. And then
I think one thing maybe that did not come across during the presentation is that a lot of this stone is often discarded, not because there's anything wrong with it, because when someone sees the Taj Mahal from a distance, they see this beautiful white monument, and that's the aspiration that people come with. They want to build another Taj Mahal, so people want like this spotless white marble. Whereas when you actually go and visit the Taj Mahal up close, it has a lot of black markings.
Yeah.
It has a lot of like blemishes and stuff. So we started with finding these blemishes, which are actually beautiful, these markings. And initially, our team worked with the local industry. So they would find it quite strange that, oh, you like this? And then over a period of time, they came to a stage where they're like, oh, there's a piece which we trashed, but we know you'd love it. So we've got it for you.
so the industry around comes to us and is like, a lot of the other.
And now, obviously over these years, they, our team, really understands and appreciates and absolutely understands this design language. And so, like, they're on it. So yeah, so that's also, like how these, the process also evolved with what we could find, what was considered, good, and, like all of these things sort of played a role.
Mm. That's a really, I can totally identify with that kind of, this is a blemished piece. But I wanted to ask, actually, building on that question about, because our students are, of course, don't have that kind of time that you have to work with pieces. It's a 3.5 month studio project, and we're trying to get into this practice of learning what it means to salvage. So right now, when a lot of projects, people are salvaging different kinds of materials.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that you've made a very nuanced decision to just work with the offcuts of marble, right? Or do you also mix other materials? And then the second question from that is, how do you make aesthetic decisions? Because, like, students might be working with e-waste, with cardboard waste, with rope and string, and just arriving at an aesthetic decision that doesn't look like it's just cobbled together, sort of a mashup of things. What are those sort of tips you can give our students when considering aesthetics?
Right. I mean, I guess the answer to your first question is that, we are like, we want to be a studio practice that sort of works with salvage material in general. And we just, work with stone because I actually grew up in this place, and, my family works with stone, and I was very sure that I didn't want to like do this as a business, but I, saw so much waste around. So we were like, let's just work with the waste.
And I think it's the excess of it. Like when you go in this region, it's just marble. Like, so I think our studio kind of shows that a little bit, because we were like, okay, because we're a small studio with a small team. And initially there was like there were 3 people, like Dushyant, me, and one of the other team member, Kamal, used to work with us.
Yeah.
And so we kind of was like, okay, let's restrict ourselves to this because this is what we can manage right now.
And this is what we have like absolutely available to us.
Yeah. But eventually I think we want to work with more materials, but I think we kind of want to keep the regional aspect of the studio. So we're doing a lot of experimental projects with like this plant-based resin, with another friend who's a material designer, and so we're slowly incorporating other things. But I think it's been quite yeah, like
slow process. And like also in terms of aesthetics, what we feel is that because we had the privilege of time here, like when you sort of, and I know it's not the same in like a studio program, you have like a 3-week project sometimes, so
Yeah.
it's definitely not the same thing. But like when one can, like just observing the everyday life, and like just the things that you see around us. I think we had spoken about this, this one slide where we spoke about the everyday life of incorporating like these sustainable practices, and you'd see this like these couple of stone marble blocks sort of stacked on each other. I don't know if any of you have seen Max Lamb's project, which is the Acne store in Stockholm.
So it's completely made with like it could be like a side in Makrana.
I mean, it's crazy, like
Oh, yeah.
this. The whole of Makrana looks like Max Lamb pieces.
So I think
It's just so inherent. It's just so
I
instinctive.
think to give like a tip, I would be like, I think we don't think that, oh, this is what we are making, and just reach that. So at every stage, we take a lot of photographs and document a lot, because we don't think, oh, it has to look like this for it be a finished piece. So a lot of times we just like really document the making, and it's quite. And at some times, you overdo it, and you're like, no, we go back to what it was like a few days ago, kind of a way. So,
But I think like whatever material you're working with, for me personally, a really good like reference point are like indigenous practices, because like like they're quite radical visually as well. Like, and and now we are slowly sort of learning to appreciate, and like you can identify techniques, you can sort of, so in every material you can find some sort of indigenous practices at any in any part of the world. So I think for me personally, that serves as a really good reference point to make aesthetic decisions, to make like logistical decisions and functional decisions as well.
That's a really good point. And we do stress upon the documentation part. So hopefully that's nice to hear as well. Thank you. Any other question from anyone online or in the studio? No?
Not a question. I have a reference of, I think it's a Korean design company you might like if you don't know it anyway. It's called Sangjang. I could screen share where they do you know them?
Yeah.
Combine stone and wood to have these.
Yeah.
I can screen share just.
yes.
Yeah.
They have these assemblages of materials that look like they sort of happened, but they're all very beautiful. I just think of that.
For me also, I think like the bases have a very plinth quality to them. At the same time, they could be something in a house. So that's also quite beautiful. Like it's almost like eating this sort of rough, rock or boulder.
I think that's maybe also an answer to your question earlier, Anna. What makes it not look like something just, found stuff stuck together is that you need these precise cuts where they are joined and where they go into each other. So it's very clear this didn't fall from the sky, right? So even though it's maybe almost hidden or subtle, your intervention is very in there. So I think that's where that's how it.
That's a great point about how you join things, or how do you make that so. How do you make the history or the legacy of the material visible by leaving it in the open and joining it? Yeah.
Because in order to accommodate it, you have to, there's investment on the human side.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's the best thing to like sort of say to a class of students, but also you don't always make a great project when you are in school. Like sometimes people are really pressured, and then when you get out, you get the right amount of time. So yeah, like practices evolve. Even when we started, like we were doing very geometric things, and I think with time we have now arrived to like sort of more raw things which we were always attracted to and wanted to do more. So I think, time is really important as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But I think it's absolutely, and I think this is a chance for them to experiment, experimenting with what are the kind of things, aesthetics, what are the kind of materials and skills and processes that could, any other questions or thoughts? Anybody? No? Everyone's very quiet today.
It's also the case that half the studio, including staff, is sick since a week. There's everyone, because it's like cold season came in, everyone wearing masks for the last 2 years, everyone's immune system is down. So it's like, it's, so, yeah.
It's been a rather, But anyway, I would like to thank you. If there are no more questions, thank you so much for your time, because it's really inspiring, and please keep us in the loop of your new works.
Yes, perfect.
And hopefully when you come to India this time.
I will definitely. Maybe we can do our next field trip in India.
I mean, we've been urging Anna for 5 years now to do an India field trip. So it's on
Money.
Yes.
We need to rob a bank. But yes, we will do a field trip. We really want to do a studio field trip. It's on the cards. So one way or the other. See you soon.
Perfect.
See you.
Thank you.
Bye.
See you. Bye. Bye. Thank you. Bye, everyone. See you.